This is my 1997 Volvo 850 base model. Now, back in about 2010, when I first moved to Austin, Texas, I had a 1998 turquoise Toyota Tercel that mulched its transmission on the way to a car meet in San Antonio and had to be dragged back home with a U-Haul trailer that my best friend rented to attach to his Maxima. From there, I basically had nothing. I started walking to work from my apartment there about, 4 miles this way, 4 miles that way every day, and that got rather tiresome after a while, and I realized that there was a very simple solution to this. The Volvo line of cars at this time were very cheap and accessible at this time, especially the Volvo 240 cars. And so what I decided to do was to get myself a 1989 Volvo 240 GL that had transmission problems, had basically disintegrating seats, no acceleration whatsoever, and no knowledge in my brain of how this car functioned whatsoever. With this car, I was able to sort of gain more mechanical knowledge about these cars and glean from this knowledge that would help me with my next car, which happened to be a 1989 red Wagon 240. And that car gave me about a good couple of years of love before my mother-in-law backed into it with an early 2000s Ford truck. That led me on to my next purchase, which was a 1999 Jetta TDI, which was arguably one of my worst decisions that I have ever made as a car owner. It was terrible to work on, it was expensive to have serviced, and basically nobody wanted to touch this awful, terrible thing. It had over 300,000 miles on it, and I'm pretty sure it would have gone so much further had it not had a dreadful oil leak and just so many other mechanical issues, and no mechanics really out there really willing to put their hands on a diesel engine, which then led me to sell that car off and purchase another sort of cow pasture find Volvo 240, as you guys know as Goldie. And so what I would like to do today is introduce you to the quirks and features of the car that led me to after selling, allowed me to be able to move on to this 1997 Volvo 850, inspired by the great Robert DIY, whose videos I've been watching since the existence of his channel. I just love listening to older guys talk about things that they're passionate about, especially whenever it's weird and quirky cars, very specific weird and quirky cars. My grandfather was a very specific Volkswagen guy, as was my dad. Me, the V car gene just sort of like stayed within my DNA, but for some reason when I grew up, it just translated as Volvo, and I thusly became very obsessed with these cars. And so I will show you today how this has been probably one of my most expensive mistakes to date. Bear all of the information that I'm about to tell you in mind, knowing that I love this car. I would not trade this car for anything. It lives inside of a garage that I pay $90 a month for. It has had a Jalopnik article written about it. It has been in a episode of Regular Car Reviews that has almost 200,000 views and over 5,000 thumbs up. But the cost to get there hasn't been quite so glamorous. Now, at an initial cost, this car was listed on Craigslist for $2,400. I walked up to the car, surveyed it, and using my excellent car surveying skills, was able to find some very small issues with the car that I was able to use as leverage to bring the owner down to about the price of $1,600, which I feel like was a really great deal, considering how good a condition the interior of the car is. And the exterior has its aging, its issues, its problems, but then again, it is a white luxury car from the 90s. It is going to show its character within a matter of years, but I didn't quite expect this much character. So throw that number on the screen, and from there, actually I have these all backwards. From there, after having to deal with an issue with the previous owner filling out the title wrong, I had to pay extra fees to get a bonded title on this car in order to, you know, make sure that it was clear of any liens or anything like that, or that it wasn't stolen or something like that, or that the previous owner wasn't trying to fraudulently sell me this car. I basically just brought it into Swedish Auto Service on North Lamar for an A inspection, an AB inspection. Check it out. Tell me what you think. You know, what does it need? What do you recommend? And of course, as I was driving it, I noticed that there was a few things wrong with it. I noticed that the suspension was clunky. I noticed that the engine kind of was lacking in a little bit of oomph. But other than that, everything else seemed to be fairly well taken care of. What they recommended me, though, was a clutch kit, a battery cable, after recommended me a rear main seal for an oil leak that I didn't notice whatsoever. The owner told me previously that it drank oil. This car currently has 248,000 miles on it, and so it is not unreasonable to think that this car would drink more than a quart of oil in between oil changes. That is not an unreasonable thing to think or imagine or believe or have to deal with in a car like this one. So I really wasn't too concerned about the oil leak. They spun it to me as if I loved this car and I wanted to keep this thing on the road forever. I would pull the trigger on this several $100 repair. Otherwise, I was just a bad car owner. Okay? I was treated like an idiot from the moment I walked into that store, and I gave into it pretty dang easily. And they called me up sometime around then, and also at some point talked me into a $265 clutch kit on the grounds that it would be more expensive to do it later on because they already had the engine and the transmission apart. I said yes to it anyway. That all wound up to being about $1,769.82. 5 days later, I brought the car back in for basically the same exact suspension noises. I was concerned about the suspension of this car. It was clunky, it was loud, it was awkward to drive, the steering was rough. They recommended me 2 new front control arms that they noticed were warm. It says right here underneath the labor description, check suspension for recommended repair. Replace LF and RF lower control arms at $199.72 a piece. That entire repair cost me $685.83 and did not repair the noise and the rough driving that I was experiencing. Okay? I brought the car back to Swedish Auto Service to deal with this same exact service writer. I was recommended and declined shock mounts, upper torque rods, an evap smoke test, replacement of a steering rack, and replacement of a radiator for a leak that, again, I had not noticed at all. I keep this car in a garage with a concrete floor, and you would think that if I saw a single leak coming out of this car, that the first thing I would do is try and figure out what it was and how to stop it, because I care about this car this deeply. Quoted $700 to fix the clunk in the rear, $300 to do these upper and lower torque rods that I actually turned out didn't need. An evap smoke test that is from some J-tubes that are attached to the rear evap system that I already know about, that I can replace myself, and I will get to around to, but the check engine light hasn't come back on since. So I don't really know if that is true or not. And $1,000 to remove and replace the steering rack. I did pull the trigger on the radiator because he did show me that it was leaking coolant. I didn't see it leaking coolant before. $659.52 for a new radiator. And then, I've never heard of this happening before. I went back 4 months later to save up the money to get this steering rack done and replaced, because I thought this would finally take care of the clunking noise that I'd been dealing with and the rough riding and everything, okay? I was told that this was an extreme safety issue, despite the fact that the car drove perfectly fine and in a straight line and was very easy to handle, and no matter what weather I was able to drive it in, I had control of this car. The service writer or the owner tried to convince me that I was a danger to them and others, and that they in fact were liable for my safety, and that's what required this repair. And I had to prepay $500 for the part that they needed, which I have never had to do in my entire life, is put a partial down payment on a part that is to be replaced on a car at a specialty shop that is supposed to service these cars, okay? And then went back and paid the rest of the $756.08, which that entire repair came out to $1,256.08, all in all. And after all of that, I could still rock this car back and forth and hear cluck-hunk, 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 cluck-hunk. And every time I went over a speed bump, I felt like I was gonna break my damn hip like an 80-year-old, because there was something still wrong that they had failed to address, and I have everything to back it up that says that I brought this car in multiple times to address a single issue and was treated with nothing but disrespect and lies. I brought my car to a completely different place that does not specialize in Volvos whatsoever. I was charged $365.04 to replace both back shocks, and this solved the problem completely. This completely fixed my issue. This car is a dreamboat to drive now, as a result of all of the other superfluous repairs that I had to suffer through in order to get it to this point. But this car drives like a dreamboat now, thanks to a very simple repair that they could have given me from the forefront, in spite of trying to deal with other niggling things that eventually would have gone bad, and I would have had to repair, obviously. But I was scammed into making those repairs, and I was coerced into returning to the shop because the issue that I initially came in with was never actually dealt with. And then they had the audacity to call me and harass me on my personal phone because I had something to say about it. I'm done. Either way, I love this car. This is a fantastic car. This is my favorite car that I've ever owned. And let me show it to you now. Alrighty then, let's just go for a little drive. And so if you guys don't know, the Volvo 850 actually has racing heritage. If you look up the 1990s BTCC, the British Touring Car Racing Championship, the Volvo 850 dominated in its ranks in both whenever it came out as a sedan and as an estate, dominated in its category, and basically was the first cool thing that Volvo ever made. This car was supposed to be utterly life-changing for the Volvo brand, to change it from a stuffy car for what they say antique collectors and painting dealers or something like that, and turn it into a car more suitable for a youthful, sporty generation, you know, that lusted after cars like BMWs and Mercedes. This car was intended to compete with that in the 90s, and this is what they came up with. A 5-cylinder front-wheel drive. Unfortunately, the turbocharged cars only ever came with an automatic, but because mine is naturally aspirated, I get a manual. And everybody else that wants to have a native turbo has to swap theirs in, because we can all appreciate the whiz of a turbo spool. Now, the turbo that this car came with was not a humongous one. The R-spec cars came with a whole lot of other little accoutrements that made them that much more fun to drive. But the fact that they were turbocharged didn't really do what wasn't really the entire package for them. I'll do a pull for you guys. Here, listen to this thing. This thing is utterly gutless. Ooh, but the noise! Must have been what the Scotsmen felt like when they discovered the first bagpipe. It torques in first gear. Okay. So on public roads, we're pretty zippy. The steering's nice and sharp. Now that the steering rack is fixed up. And actually on the highway, this thing just floats like a dream. It's actually quite fun. We have a Dodge coming up on me on the left. Oh shit. Oh, they're gonna go for it! Thanks, dude. That semi totally just cut them off. And now they're coming and they're pissed. Oh, shit. What's up? Oh, man. I can smell their fucking weed. Alright, well that should just about wrap up this horrible episode of Whitney 850. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this little ride along. It wasn't very informational. I'm not Tyler Hoover. I'm just some guy with a Volvo. Anyways, toodles.